My wife cheated on me for 7 months with her lover. She proposed an open marriage to keep seeing him, but I only accepted to destroy her in divorce. Now she has minimal custody and everyone knows the truth. I'm 38 years old. I own a construction company in Denver, and about a year and a half ago, my life exploded in a way I never imagined. Like those stories you see in movies or read online and think, nah, that doesn't happen in real life. But I swear it does happen. It all started when I found my wife's messages with another guy. But I don't want to get ahead of myself because the story is longer than that. Much longer. And I need to tell it from the beginning, so everything I did afterwards makes sense. I met Catherine when we were like 25 years old. I had just started my construction business with a partner, and I was always stressed, covered in dust and drywall, working like 12 hours a day trying to get the company off the ground. It was at a coffee shop near my office, a regular Starbucks where I went every morning for my coffee. And she was there with her laptop working on some marketing or advertising project. She always had her screen full of colors and designs. She was beautiful. I mean really beautiful. Long brown hair, green eyes, that smile that makes you forget how tired you are, you know. We started talking. First just casual greetings, then longer conversations, and eventually I asked for her number. We dated for like 2 years before getting married, and everything was perfect, literally perfect. She was fun, smart, ambitious with her career, and I was completely in love. Like I thought, I found the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. We got married when we were 27. It was a small but nice wedding, and we never did a prenup because, honestly, at that point we had nothing. My company was barely growing and she was working freelance making basic money. The first years of marriage were good, normal I guess, with the typical ups and downs of any couple, but nothing serious. My business started growing quite a bit. We got bigger contracts. I hired more people, and money started flowing better. Catherine got pregnant when we were 29, and we had Addison, our oldest daughter, and 2 years later, Hunter came along, our son. When Addison was born, Catherine decided to stop working to stay home with the kids. And I was totally fine with it because my company was already making enough money to keep us comfortable. Like we bought a nice house in a good neighborhood, we had 2 decent cars. We could go out to eat without worrying about the menu prices, those things. She became a full-time mom, and I kept buried in work, getting home late almost every day, occasionally traveling to supervise projects in other cities, basically being the provider while she handled everything with the house and kids. For years, everything seemed fine, or at least I thought it was fine. Catherine had her group of friends, other moms from the neighborhood and from the kids' school, and they started doing girls' nights out like once or twice a month. At first, it was normal. They'd go to dinner, drink wine, complain about their husbands, I guess, the typical stuff. I'd stay home with Addison and Hunter, put them to bed, we'd watch movies, order pizza, and honestly, I liked that time with them because during the week I barely saw them because of work. But after a while, maybe when we'd been married like 6 or 7 years, those nights became more frequent, like once a week, sometimes twice. Catherine started dressing up more to go out, full makeup, clothes she normally didn't wear, strong perfume, and I thought, well, she wants to look good for her friends. There's nothing wrong with that. She'd come home late, like 2 or 3 in the morning sometimes, and when I'd ask how the night went, she'd just say, good. We had a lot of fun without giving many details. I started noticing other changes too, small things that individually meant nothing, but together started forming an uncomfortable pattern. Catherine was more emotionally distant. Like when I'd tell her about my day or about some project at work, she'd just say, oh, that's nice, without really paying attention. Our sex practically disappeared. We'd go weeks without touching each other. And when I tried to initiate something, she always had an excuse. That she was tired, that her head hurt, that she had to get up early. Whatever. Her phone became something sacred. She never left it lying around like before. She always had it with her. And I noticed she'd put a password on it when she didn't have one before. When I'd ask who she was texting so much, she'd just say, the girls or stuff from the mom's WhatsApp group. I wanted to believe her. Honestly, I wanted to believe everything was fine and that I was just being paranoid because I worked a lot and maybe felt guilty for not being more present at home. Everything fell apart about a year and a half ago. In March, I think, or maybe it was April. I don't remember exactly, but it was spring because the trees were blooming. Catherine had gone out again with her friends. I was home with the kids, watching a Marvel movie with them. I think it was a Spider-Man one, and her iPad was in the living room charging. The iPad started ringing with message notifications, and normally I wouldn't have paid attention, but it was like 10 messages in a row. Ding, 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 nonstop. I thought, maybe it's an emergency from one of her friends, so I grabbed it to see if I needed to call her or something. The iPad didn't have a password. She'd never thought to put one on it because she only used it for cooking recipes and yoga videos. And when I opened it, I saw the messages on the lock screen. They were from someone named Gregory, and they weren't normal messages. Like the first one I saw said something like, "Can't wait to have you again. Last time was incredible," with a fire emoji. My heart started beating super fast. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, and I thought, no, this can't be what it looks like. There has to be an explanation. I opened the messages and found months of conversations, literal months, explicit messages describing things they'd done together, photos she'd sent him, plans to meet up, everything. I read everything that night. It took me like 2 hours to read conversation after conversation, and with each message I felt worse, like physically sick. Turns out Gregory was a guy who worked in finance, mid-level, nothing impressive from what I could research later, and Catherine had met him at one of those networking events or something like 6 months ago. The girls' nights out were actually nights with him. They'd meet at hotels. Sometimes they'd go to his apartment when I was traveling for work. And in the messages, she said things like, "My husband doesn't suspect anything. He's so naive. And this is the most exciting thing that's happened to me in years." There was a message where he asked if she was ever going to leave her husband, and she responded, "I don't know, maybe eventually, but for now, this is perfect like this." I stayed up all night reading that. The kids fell asleep on the couch with me. I had to carry them to their beds, and the whole time my mind wouldn't stop spinning trying to process what I'd just discovered. Catherine got home like at 3 in the morning. I was sitting in the living room with her iPad in my hand, waiting for her. When she walked in, I saw her differently. She was no longer the woman I knew. Or maybe she'd always been like that and I'd never seen it. I don't know. I said, "Who is Gregory?" And her face turned white, literally all the blood drained from her face. She tried to deny it at first, said he was just a friend, that I was misinterpreting the messages. But I put the iPad in her face and said, "Don't treat me like an idiot." I read everything. She sat on the couch, started crying, and I expected her to beg me for forgiveness, to tell me it had been a terrible mistake, that she'd do anything to fix it. But no, none of that happened. After crying for like 5 minutes, she calmed down and told me, with a calmness that still disturbs me when I think about it, "Travis, I'm not happy. I haven't been happy in years. I need something more in my life." I asked her how long this had been going on, and she admitted like 6 months, maybe 7, and that Gregory was special, that he made her feel alive again, young, desired, all those things that, according to her, I no longer made her feel. We were arguing until dawn, like 6 in the morning, and at some point she proposed something I never in a million years would have imagined. She said, "What if we open the marriage? We can stay together for the kids, for stability, but each of us can see other people, no secrets, everything honest and transparent." She said it so casually, like she was proposing we change cable providers or something, and I sat there thinking, is she seriously proposing this to me? I asked if she was crazy, and she said no, that many couples did this, that it was more common than people thought. And that way everyone won. She could keep seeing Gregory. I could go out with whoever I wanted if I was interested, and the kids didn't have to suffer through a divorce. In that moment, with my brain functioning at half capacity from lack of sleep and shock, something in me clicked, like a cold and calculating clarity I'd never felt before. I told her yes, that I agreed to the open marriage, but that I needed time to process everything and think through the rules carefully. She seemed relieved, almost happy. She hugged me and said, "I knew you'd understand. You're a good man, Travis." That night I slept in the guest room, and the next day, when Catherine went out with the kids to I don't know where, I called a divorce lawyer that a friend had recommended years ago. I told him the whole situation, and he said, "Don't sign anything, don't officially agree to anything yet, and start documenting everything." I also hired a private investigator, an ex-cop who did surveillance work, and I paid him to follow Catherine and document all her outings with Gregory, all her lies, everything. The plan was simple. Basically, I was going to accept this fake open marriage. I was going to let her believe everything was fine, and I was going to use that time to build such a solid divorce case that it would give me custody of my kids and minimize what I'd have to give her in the settlement. For the next few months, I lived a double life that was exhausting but necessary. On the surface, we were in this open marriage where Catherine went out with Gregory, openly, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, and I stayed home with Addison and Hunter. I told Catherine I wasn't ready to see anyone else yet, that I needed time to get used to this new dynamic, and she seemed happy with that arrangement because it basically gave her the green light to do whatever she wanted without consequences. But behind the scenes, I was working with my lawyer and the private investigator, documenting everything. Like I had photos of Catherine arriving at hotels with Gregory, message records that the investigator had gotten somehow that honestly I don't want to know about, evidence that she'd practically abandoned her responsibilities as a mother because she was always out or distracted, thinking about her next outing with him. I got much more involved with the kids during those months, not just because it was the right thing to do, but because I knew I was going to need to prove in court that I was the more present and capable parent. I started taking Addison to her ballet classes, took Hunter to his soccer games, made breakfasts and dinners, helped with homework, went to parent-teacher meetings at school. All those things Catherine used to handle alone, or that I did occasionally. The kids noticed the change. Addison, who was like 8 years old at that point, asked me one day, "Daddy, why isn't Mommy home much anymore?" And I told her something like, "Mommy is busy with her friends, honey, but I'm here for..." I documented all of this too. Like I had a calendar where I marked every school activity I went to, every meal I made, every night I stayed with them while Catherine was out, everything. Like 4 or 5 months into this arrangement, something unexpected happened that complicated things but also made them more interesting. Paige, who was Catherine's best friend for years, one of the girls she'd supposedly been going out with on those girls' nights, contacted me. She sent me a direct message on Facebook saying she needed to talk to me, that she had information I should know. We met for coffee, at a different place than the Starbucks where I'd met Catherine because I didn't want memories of that, and Paige told me she'd known everything about the affair from the beginning. Catherine had confessed everything to her and had asked her to cover for her, to lie for her, and Paige had done it for months, feeling worse and worse about it. She told me, "Travis, you're a good guy. You don't deserve this, and your kids don't deserve to have a mother who prioritizes her affair over them." She showed me messages where Catherine asked her to say they'd been together certain nights when actually Catherine had been with Gregory. There was even a message where Catherine laughed about me, saying something like, "Travis believes everything. It's so easy to lie to him." Paige was attractive, she always had been, like blonde, tall, with that professional and elegant style because she worked in human resources for a big company. I'd never thought of her that way, obviously because I was married and she was my wife's friend, but in that moment, sitting there with her, while she told me all this, I felt a connection I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. She was furious with Catherine for using her as an accomplice, and I was grateful that finally someone was on my side in all this mess. We started talking more often, first just as friends supporting each other, but eventually it became something more. We went out to dinner a couple times, went to the movies, and like 6 months after I found Catherine's messages, Paige and I started a relationship. Technically, I wasn't breaking any rules because supposedly we were in an open marriage. But I knew Catherine was going to be upset anyway because Paige was her friend, or had been her friend until that moment. I kept my relationship with Paige secret at first, not because I had to, but because I wanted to control when and how that information came out. Paige perfectly understood the situation. She knew I was building a divorce case and that all this was temporary until I could finally officially separate from Catherine. We spent like 3 months seeing each other without Catherine knowing, but eventually one of her other friends saw us together at a restaurant and told her. Catherine came home that night furious, screaming, saying how dare I go out with her best friend, that it was an unforgivable betrayal, and I literally laughed in her face. I told her, "Seriously? Are you seriously talking to me about betrayal?" You're the one who was fucking Gregory for months while I was working to support this family. You're the one who proposed this open marriage. And now you're angry because I finally found someone? It doesn't work like that, Catherine. She had no real arguments. She was just angry because she'd lost control of the situation. Because it was no longer just her having her fun on the side while I stayed home waiting for her. Catherine's relationship with Gregory started deteriorating around the same time, and it didn't surprise me at all. Turns out Gregory had been excited about the affair because it was secret, forbidden, exciting, all those things that make people feel alive when they're bored with their lives. But when it was no longer secret, when Catherine could see him openly without hiding, the excitement went away and Gregory started losing interest. He started canceling plans, responding to messages later and later, no longer seeking her out with the same frequency. And Catherine was going crazy trying to keep his attention. I knew all this because the private investigator kept working and because Paige told me things other friends mentioned to her. Basically, I had information from all sides. Seeing Catherine desperate for a guy who clearly didn't want her the same way anymore gave me a satisfaction I probably shouldn't admit, but it's the truth. After everything she'd put me through, I felt she deserved to experience at least a little of that pain and rejection. Like 8 or 9 months after discovering the affair, when I already had enough documented evidence and my lawyer told me we were ready, I finally filed for divorce. Catherine was shocked. Literally couldn't believe I was doing this. She told me, but we agreed to the open marriage. We agreed this would work, and I explained to her as calmly as possible. No, Catherine, I never agreed to anything. I just let you believe, I agreed, while I gathered evidence of your abandonment of this family, of your affair, of how you've prioritized Gregory over our children for almost a year. I showed her I had records of all the nights she'd been out, photos from the private investigator, messages I'd recovered, testimonies from people including Paige about how she'd used her friends to cover for her, everything. Her face when she realized what had happened, that I'd played her better than she'd played me. That face I'll remember forever. The divorce process was intense but relatively quick compared to other cases my lawyer had handled. Catherine hired her own lawyer, obviously, and at first she tried to fight for full custody of the kids, claiming she'd been the primary caregiver for years and that I was always working. But I had all that documentation from the last months, showing I'd been the present parent while she was out pursuing her affair. I had testimonies from school teachers saying was the one who went to meetings and events. I had pediatrician records showing I was the one taking the kids to their medical appointments. Her lawyer knew they didn't have a strong case, especially with all the evidence of the affair and abandonment of family responsibilities. So eventually we agreed to custody, where I had the kids 70% of the time and she had 30%, basically alternating weekends and one night during the week. The asset division was another battle because Catherine wanted half of everything, including my construction business that I'd built from scratch, basically. Her argument was that she'd sacrificed her career to take care of the kids while I built the company, and therefore deserved her share. My lawyer argued that the company's value had grown exponentially in recent years when she was no longer contributing to the household in any significant way, and that her affair had caused emotional and financial damage to the family because I'd had to spend money on private investigators and therapy for myself, and eventually for the kids too. In the end, we agreed. She'd receive a one-time payment of an amount. I prefer not to mention exactly, but it was significantly less than what she would have gotten if we didn't have all that evidence of her behavior. And she'd receive limited spousal support for only 3 years, enough time for her to find work and establish herself on her own. The house stayed with me because I was the one with primary custody of the kids, and they needed stability. I couldn't take them out of their home and neighborhood where they had all their friends and school. Catherine had to move to a small apartment in a cheaper part of Denver, and according to Paige, who still has contact with some mutual friends, Catherine is working part-time at a clothing store or something, barely earning enough to cover her basic expenses. Gregory completely disappeared from her life like 2 months after I filed for divorce. I guess he realized Catherine, with all her legal and emotional drama, was no longer the fun, uncomplicated mistress he'd been looking for. The divorce was finalized like 6 months ago. The whole process took about a full year from when I filed the papers until the judge signed the final agreement. Life now is completely different from what it was 2 years ago, like completely different in every way. Addison is now 10 years old and Hunter is 8. And they're both okay considering the circumstances, I guess. At first, it was hard to explain to them why Mommy and Daddy weren't going to live together anymore, especially because for months they'd seen this weird situation where their mother went out all the time and I was always there. We told them, well, I basically told them, because Catherine was barely present in those conversations, that sometimes adults realize it's better not to be married, that we both loved them but that we couldn't be together anymore. All those phrases you're supposed to say to not traumatize your kids. Addison is smart, very smart, and I know she understands more than she says. One day she asked me if Mommy left because she had a boyfriend, and I didn't know what to tell her exactly because I don't want to badmouth Catherine in front of the kids, even though she deserves it. So, I just told her things were complicated, and that when she was older, she'd understand better. Hunter is younger and seems less affected, or maybe he's just better at hiding his emotions. I'm not sure. They both go to child therapy once a week. A psychologist who specializes in divorce that took me a while to find but has been good with them, helps them process everything and express what they feel without feeling guilty or confused. Paige and I are still together, and it's been amazing, honestly, like she's everything Catherine wasn't. She's present, emotionally available, supports my decisions with the kids, and the kids like her, which is the most important thing to me. She doesn't live with us yet because I want to go slow for Addison and Hunter's sake. I don't want them to feel like I'm replacing their mother or that I'm moving too fast after the divorce. Paige perfectly understands that and respects that pace. She comes to dinner some nights, sometimes stays over when the kids are with Catherine on their weekends, and slowly she's becoming part of our daily life without forcing anything. My business is better than ever. Maybe because now I can concentrate without the constant drama that was my marriage. Or maybe because having to fight for my kids gave me extra motivation to make sure they never lacked anything. I hired a good project manager who handles a lot of the day-to-day stuff, so I can be more present at home, take the kids to school in the mornings, be there when they arrive in the afternoons, have dinner with them, help them with homework, put them to bed. Catherine has the kids basically every other weekend, and one Wednesday each week from 5 until 8 at night, and honestly sometimes I feel like she doesn't even use all that time. She's canceled several of her weekends saying she has to work or doesn't feel well, and the kids aren't even surprised anymore when it happens. They just say, okay, we'll stay with Dad then and go on with their lives. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect now or that I don't have difficult days, because I do. Sometimes I wake up at night wondering at what point my marriage went to shit. When exactly Catherine stopped loving me, or if she ever really loved me the way I loved her. I wonder if there's something I could have done differently, if I worked too much, if I didn't pay enough attention, but then I remember the messages I read that night on her iPad. I remember how she proposed that open marriage so casually, and I realized no, it wasn't my fault. It was her decision to do what she did. Some people just aren't made for commitment or for putting their family first, and Catherine apparently was one of those people. The kids ask me sometimes about their mother, like why doesn't she see them more often, or why is she always tired or distracted when they're with her? I try not to badmouth Catherine in front of them, I really try, but it's hard when I see how she disappoints them again and again. I tell them things like, Mommy loves you, but she's going through a difficult time, or Mommy is learning to live alone, and that's a big change. Sound comforting, I guess. Last week, Addison told me something that broke my heart a little, but also made me feel I did the right thing. We were having dinner, just the three of us because Paige had a work event and the subject of summer vacation came up. Addison asked if we were going somewhere, maybe the beach like we used to do when she was younger, and I told her yes, that I was thinking of renting a house in California for a week. Hunter got excited and asked if Mommy was coming too, and before I could answer, Addison said, Hunter, we don't do things like that with Mommy anymore. She has her life and we have ours. She said it without anger or sadness, just like stating a fact, and I didn't know whether to feel relieved that she'd accepted it or sad that a 10-year-old girl had already understood that her mother had chosen to put herself before her children. Catherine tries to stay in touch. She sends me messages, sometimes asking how the kids are, if they need anything, offering to change visitation schedules. But the truth is, our communication is minimal and professional, just what's necessary to coordinate things about the kids and nothing more. I found out from one of the ex-friends she has left that she's dating someone new. I don't know who, and honestly, I don't care. I just hope she doesn't bring him around the kids until it's something serious and stable, and we have that in writing in the custody agreement anyway. She knows that if she introduces the kids to every guy she dates, I'm going back to court to modify the agreement. And my lawyer is still available if I need to do that. I don't know what's going to happen long term, like if eventually Catherine is going to mature and be a more present mother, or if the kids are going to grow up resenting her absence and her decisions, or if Paige and I are going to work forever, or we're just good now because everything is relatively new still. What I do know is that I made the right decisions when I discovered the affair, that instead of exploding emotionally and doing everything impulsively, I took the time to build a solid case that allowed me to protect my kids and give them the stable life they deserve. A lot of people have told me I was manipulative or calculating for accepting the open marriage just to gather evidence. And maybe they're right. Maybe I was. But honestly, I don't regret anything because at the end of the day, my kids are with me, they're safe, they're mostly happy. And they don't have to grow up watching their father be a doormat that their mother can step on whenever she wants. Last night, Hunter got into my bed in the middle of the night because he'd had a nightmare. Something about being lost in a giant mall and not being able to find anyone. I hugged him and told him I was always going to be there to find him, that he was never going to be alone as long as I was alive, and he fell back asleep in 5 minutes. Paige was there too. She'd stayed that night because the kids were supposed to be with Catherine, but she canceled last minute again, and the three of us fell asleep together in my bed, cramped and uncomfortable, but together. And in that moment, I thought that this, exactly this, is what made all the drama and pain of the last year and a half worth it. For these little things that make it worth getting up every morning and moving forward,